All right, let's just jump right in. Think about this for a second. Is peace really just the absence of war? Like, if two groups aren't actively shooting at each other, does that automatically mean everything's totally fine? It's a huge question, right? But it's exactly the kind of critical thinking you need to bring to the table to absolutely crush your upcoming exams.
Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving deep into the ultimate exam blueprint for GNS 302 Peace and Conflict Resolution. Think of this as your high-yield study guide. We're going to take weeks of kind of dense, heavy academic material and distill it all down into clear, easy-to-remember concepts so you can walk into that exam hall feeling 100% confident. Let's do this.
Okay, here's our game plan for today. We're going to cover peace and security, dive into key theories of conflict, and look at major case studies. Then we'll tackle insurgency versus terrorism and wrap the whole thing up with conflict resolution mechanisms. Simple as that.
Starting right off with Section 1, Peace and Security. We need to lock down these core concepts right away, because examiners love testing these right out of the gate.
Back in 1969, sociologist Johann Galtung dropped a really crucial distinction that you absolutely need to know. On one hand, you've got negative peace, and that's basically just no direct violence. Nobody is fighting. But, and here's a massive hint for your exam, just because the guns are silent doesn't mean everything is fixed. Positive peace is what we're actually aiming for. It's the presence of justice, equity, and fairness. It means the root causes, the real structural issues have been addressed. Think of it like a family that stopped yelling at each other, but they're still secretly seething. That's negative peace. But a family that actually talks it out and respects each other, now that's positive peace.
Now, traditionally, security just meant protecting a country's borders, right? But in 1994, the UNDP totally flipped the script. They shifted the focus to individual human security. This table right here is highly testable, so pay attention. It breaks human security down into 7 dimensions: economic, food, health, environmental, personal, community, and political. To put that into perspective, especially in an African context, this is a real game changer. It means you could be totally safe from a foreign army invading, but if you're dealing with extreme poverty, disease, or corrupt governance, you are still dangerously insecure. Definitely take a mental snapshot of these 7 dimensions for your revision.
Moving into Section 2, Key Theories of Conflict. If you can explain the why behind a conflict in your essays, you are practically guaranteed to score high marks.
First up, we've got structural conflict theory. Johann Galtung pops up again here with this idea of structural violence. This theory argues that the deepest roots of conflict aren't just, bad people doing bad things, it's unjust systems. When a system systematically denies a whole group of people access to resources or opportunities or just basic human dignity, like paying literal poverty wages or completely shutting an ethnic group out of political power, that is structural violence. And eventually, those deep, unaddressed grievances, they're going to boil over into direct physical violence.
Now, let's completely shift gears with the realist theory of conflict. This comes from international relations, and it paints a much, much harsher picture. Realism basically says the world is anarchic, meaning there's no giant world government making sure everyone plays nice. Because nobody is enforcing the rules, groups act purely out of self-interest, fiercely competing for power and survival. It's a strike-before-you-get-struck mentality. And honestly, it doesn't just apply internationally. It perfectly explains local conflicts too, where communities feel they literally have to fight preemptively just to protect themselves.
Next up is the frustration-aggression theory. Some Yale psychologists came up with this way back in 1939, and it hits the nail right on the head. Basically, when a group's goals like, say, finding a job or getting fair treatment are constantly blocked, this intense frustration builds up. Psychologist Leonard Berkowitz pointed out that this creates a sort of volatile readiness for violence. It's like a powder keg. All it takes is one external trigger, maybe a fiery speech or one perceived injustice, to spark that readiness into actual violence. For your exam, make sure you connect this directly to how poverty makes marginalized youth super vulnerable to extremist recruitment.
Okay, Section 3, Major Case Studies. Theories are awesome, but examiners really want to see you apply them to the actual realities on the ground in Nigeria.
Right in the preface of your lecture notes, there's this incredibly powerful truth. Peace and conflict are not abstract ideas. They are lived realities. You've got to remember, you aren't just writing about dried textbook concepts here. You're writing about the farmer-herder clashes, the insurgencies, the actual things shaping real lives and communities right now. So ground your essays in that reality.
Let's dive into one of those critical realities, the farmer-herder conflict. Listen, if you get an essay on this, please do not just say it's about cows eating crops. You've got to break down the structural causes. Look at this list. We're talking about a massive demographic boom, causing crazy pressure on land. We've got climate change literally drying up northern grazing routes, pushing herders south. Then there's the total collapse of traditional community dispute mechanisms, plus really outdated policies, like the 1978 Land Use Act, that just don't guarantee farming or grazing rights. Oh, and the proliferation of small arms making everything lethal. Hitting these exact bullet points is how you show a really deep, comprehensive understanding.
Another huge case study is the Niger Delta crisis. This is your absolute classic textbook example of an economic conflict. It's driven by what political scientists call the resource curse. It's this wild paradox where finding massive natural wealth actually creates poverty and conflict. Local communities are literally sitting on billions of dollars of oil, bearing all the toxic environmental damage, but they remain incredibly poor while the profits just flow somewhere else. That extreme economic marginalization, that structural violence, that is exactly what fueled the militancy in the region.
Moving to Section 4, Insurgency versus Terrorism. Pay super close attention here, because examiners love, and I mean absolutely love, testing the difference between these two. Okay, so an insurgency is an armed rebellion against a government. The big takeaway here is that insurgents have a political program. They actually want to control territory, they want to govern, and they try to build a base among the locals. The Niger Delta militancy? That's an insurgency. Terrorism, though, is entirely different. It's not about holding territory. It's about deliberately targeting civilians to create massive fear, panic, and political pressure. Think about the absolutely tragic 2014 abduction of the Chibok schoolgirls. That was a terrorist act, designed to maximize media shock and humiliate the state. So, insurgency equals territorial governance, terrorism equals indiscriminate panic. Don't mix those up.
Finally, we're at Section 5, Conflict Resolution Mechanisms. We've talked a lot about the problems, so let's flip the script and look at the actionable tools we use to actually build sustainable peace.
Here is your go-to checklist for alternative dispute resolution, or ADR. You absolutely need to know the difference between mediation, where a neutral third party just helps people talk without forcing an outcome, and arbitration, where that third party steps in and makes a binding decision. Also, do not forget community security initiatives, like community policing, which is all about police and citizens actually collaborating. And finally, you've got to highlight the vital role of local actors. We're talking traditional institutions like OBAs and emirs using their cultural authority to settle things, and religious approaches using concepts like the Islamic tradition of sul or interfaith dialogue to bridge those divides.
So, we've covered the core theories, the 7 dimensions of human security, the case studies, and the resolution tools. As we wrap up this explainer and you get ready to head into that exam hall, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. Based on everything we just broke down, from structural violence all the way to community mediation, do you think lasting positive peace is actually achievable in your own community? And honestly, what role are you going to play in building it? Good luck with your revision, you're going to do great, and keep studying smart.